Good evening, folks, and a hearty welcome to our drive-in theater.
Keelan Cole with his third touchdown.
Defender Josh Norman to his backside.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Pulp Fantasy. I'm Scott Rinear, at Munder Difflin FF on Twitter. Do this YouTube series for In Between Media. Also write a column for In Between Media called The Mondays. Go check it out. Go check out In Between Media and all the work a lot of good people do there. Anyway, so this episode of Pulp Fantasy is going to be different than what I typically do. I'm not going to be doing any clips. I'm not going to be doing any movie scenes, not really any jokes, and I'm not really going to be talking about football or fantasy football. So pretty much 100% different than what I normally do. I'm sure most everybody has heard by now that Mike Tagliere, who was a well-known, well-respected member of the fantasy community and the planet. He passed away last Friday. He lost his battle with COVID-19 that he had struggled with for quite some time. And I have a column called The Mondays, and I had already basically done it and finished it by the deadline when the news broke, and so I decided not to switch gears and talk about Mike, but I have this YouTube series I do, which you're watching right now. And this is a perfect place to talk about Mike. So I'm going to talk about Mike a little bit. I'm going to talk about my dad a little bit, some recent stuff that we've gone through that I really didn't make public, at least that public. This is just going to be one long shoot. I didn't write a script for this, so bear with me. There's probably going to be a lot of ums, as you've already heard. And if I make a mistake, I'm probably just going to keep going. I don't know if I'm going to edit it out or not. This is just going to be straight real talk. So, Mike Tagliere, one of my favorite analysts in the community since I started paying attention, with any kind of seriousness. Head fantasy writer, Fantasy Pros, podcaster, and an all-around just great guy. You've probably heard it. I've heard it a bunch. Sentences start with, I didn't know Mike personally, but... And I've heard that so much that really speaks volumes to me, that there's so many people in this space and elsewhere who didn't actually know Mike personally, but have all of these good things to say. And he had this impact on so many people that probably never actually had a conversation with him, in person or digital, and I'm in that group. He may have liked something I tweeted at one point or a comment. I don't know, maybe, but I didn't know him personally. So there's a part of my brain that goes to a place of, well, do I really have a right to say anything? He wasn't a personal friend of mine. Are you just attention seeking, all that kind of stuff? And I say, to hell with all that. And I've seen it. The impact he had on so many is apparent. It's obvious. For me personally, like a lot of things other people have been saying, he came across as just a straightforward, honest, decent person. His fantasy analysis and his work ethic was obviously fire. You could see it pouring out of his work. Primer is one of my favorite articles, series, whatever you want to call it, of all time when it comes to fantasy football. I did not miss an edition of the Primer. If someone had asked me, I don't know, if somebody had asked me something like, hey, who do you want to be like in this industry or whatever, last year when I kind of started to make my path towards it, I probably would have come up with, I want to be like Tags. I want to be like Tags. My brother, my little bro, was born on August 21st, 1982, which is roughly a month before Mike Tagliere was born. So that piece hit me too. That comparison inevitably for me, because he's basically was the same exact age as my brother, and I don't consider my brother to be old. So that part of this situation hit a little. That was a personal part of it where I was just like, I couldn't help but picture something like that happening, and I can't imagine. Tabby, I also don't know Tabby Tagliere personally, but I'm just want to say I've said it via tweeting and replying, but I want to say it here too. How much and I'm assuming so many, appreciated you keeping everybody up to date as to what was going on. We have a family friend who, it's not somebody I'm like super close with, but it's somebody I've known since I was a kid, who contracted COVID over the summer, and he was in ICU for a long time, relatively speaking, and it didn't look good. And in his case, luckily, thank God, he pulled through. So I get to talk to him and see him still. So that jumped straight into my brain. The first tweet I saw from Tabby talking about, hey, positive energy, we need some, Mike's in the hospital in the ICU. So again, appreciate so much keeping us up to date. My heart goes out, my condolences go out, my positive energy still is coming your way. The reaction in this community has been amazing. I love to see it. There's so much toxicity and negativeness sometimes on social media. To see like the GoFundMe that started up and caught on like wildfire with all the awesome people around here was it was a great thing to see. So anyway, real quick, I want to read I think it's a Facebook post that Tabby included in her announcement on Saturday morning that Mike had passed. I'm going to read it because it transitions kind of into something else I want to talk about. So here it is. It was from July 22nd, 2015, and Mike wrote, quote, "Most people need to be backed into a corner in order to fight back. It takes a tragedy for them to wake up and realize what it is they're fighting for, or what they should have been fighting for. That's not out of the ordinary. It's human nature. I know this because it took my dad passing to realize I needed to stop smoking. I'm smoke-free, by the way. I've been there. My dad did the same thing. It took cancer to realize that we shouldn't be telling each other that we should have been telling each other that we loved each other. At that point, we did. We also started saying PDQ. It stood for Pa Don't Quit. That's the purpose of this post today. Nothing tragic has happened and I'm not backed into a corner. As a matter of fact, I may have to take a step back in order to move forward. I'm as motivated as I've ever been and I'm going to do something about it. I won't stop until I reach my goals. Mike won't quit. That's what I want people to say about me. I want them to say I'm relentless. I want them to know that I need this. And although I may get turned away a few times, I'm that much closer to getting the door opened. And that door will open. Why? Because MWQ. There will always be days where you wonder why things happen, but remember this moment. If it were easy, everyone would be living their dreams. Make it happen. We just don't know what we have until it's gone." So I definitely cried the first time I read that on Saturday. I will point out that this was a post by Mike Tagliere, and I see at the bottom that Mike Tagliere also liked his post, so that's great. But this is an amazing quote. I also smoked cigarettes for a long time and was finally able to quit. But this Pa Don't Quit, that's what jumped out at me because, on a personal front, something that's happened to me recently is my dad, who's in his 80s, he's my 1.01 of human males, of dudes. He's my favorite dude. Followed closely by my little brother, my aforementioned little brother. So he had a heart attack. The Thursday before Labor Day, Thursday during the day, he kind of overexerted himself doing something and didn't feel right. And later that night, my mom could tell he didn't feel right, asked him how he was doing, and his response was, "I don't know," which in my dad's language is, there's something wrong. And so they went and checked into the hospital, not really knowing what was going on. And the doctors came back and told him he had a heart attack, was probably still having one. You know, it was relatively moderate heart attack, but he was having a heart attack. So he was admitted, and they ran some tests, did some things, and determined that, you know, he had some clogged arteries. He needed some medical attention. My mom called all of us kids. I have a brother and I have two sisters. Saturday morning to let us know. And thus started one of the longest and scariest weekends of my life as that transpired. So, key detail is he was at a hospital that didn't have the resources for any kind of surgical, you know, didn't really have the intensive care unit that would be needed and surgical unit that would be needed for the surgery that they determined he needed. So basically from when he was checked in for almost 36 hours, he was in that hospital in need of open heart surgery. And there were no beds, no surgery beds, no ICU beds, really anywhere in the greater Seattle area that had an open bed. So I'm not here to criticize people for their decisions, whether they want to be vaccinated or not. That's not the point of this video. I think the fact that my dad came probably this close to dying, just because they couldn't find him a bed, should probably tell you all you need to know about how I feel about things right now. But yeah, that Friday was probably the worst day of my life, if not one of them. When we knew they couldn't find a bed and we knew it was dire. The surgery itself has become somewhat routine. Open heart surgery, it's not as crazy as it used to be. You know, you hear things like open heart surgery, triple bypass surgery. You know, it still freaks you out, but the success rate of those types of surgeries nowadays are very high. They just couldn't find him a bed. And I don't know if we knew it at the time, but it was that close and going in a different direction. So that weekend was, it's kind of hard to explain what that weekend was like. They ended up finding a bed on Saturday morning. The other piece of this that was fairly traumatic is the hospital he was at, also because of COVID. No visitors, not just one visitor, no visitors at all. So while he was waiting to find a bed, none of his family could see him. So it ended up progressing in the best possible direction. Some very, very good people worked tirelessly to find him a bed at a hospital that allows one visitor. So my mom, like a kid in a candy shop, told us, I get to go see your dad. I get to go see Ron. That's my dad's name. Which was amazing. He had the surgery. It was a success. He's now home and recovering and doing better. I've gotten to see him a couple of times. The doctor had recommended, unvaccinated kids shouldn't be around him for a few weeks. That clock is almost up. So my girls get to go see their papa, their grandfather. So very grateful that it went the direction it did. But it was a really tough time. And again, I'm just telling you my experience and what happened. I think most people know at this point that COVID is a serious and real thing. And it affects you in many different ways. Unfortunately, it took the life of Mike Tagliere, gone too soon. And in a less direct manner, it came very close to playing a role in my dad passing away. Luckily, he didn't. And I know my dad's going to watch this because I told him, I asked him if it was okay if I talked about it on Twitter. Here's a picture of him, by the way. He's the one on the right, just in case you were wondering. But a lot of things go through your mind. My dad taught me how to fish. I might not be the best, guide or resource to take you where the fish are going to be caught, but I can cast a fishing pole like no other. I can aim, I can cast. I stand by my casting. My dad taught me how to throw a knuckleball. Still the best knuckleball I've ever seen. I remember I used to get up there and he'd throw it, and I was just like, what's happening? That's not possible. So he taught me how to throw a knuckleball. Taught me so many other things. He's also, my dad, he's been there when I've been at my lowest. I've made it pretty clear some of the stuff I've gone through and still battle with in my life. Things like addiction and being active in that it impacts everybody around you, everyone. And very much so impacted both my dad and my mom when I was younger. It's something I leave it in the past, but I don't like it. Wish it were different. My dad taught me how to throw a knuckleball and had to be there while I was blacked out, passed out, throwing up on my back, roll me over so I didn't drown. That's parenting, I guess. Like, I'll do the same for my girls. I'll do the same exact thing. It doesn't matter. But anyway, just been doing a lot of thinking about that and the knuckleball. And just all those things, like, I love my dad, obviously, and it was a really tough time. And Mike's post with the "Pa Don't Quit" quote, hashtag, just hit me like a ton of bricks when I saw it, because that's exactly what we just went through. So I appreciate that the universe putting me in the place to read that from Tag's brain. Whenever he wrote it, whenever I read it, that moment was powerful. So anyway, I think I'm going to stop now. This was, like I said, unscripted, unplanned, rambling. I hope it made some sort of sense. I did want to say something about how I felt about Mr. Tagliere, sorry. That's old me that thought that it went at the end. Tagliere, and just how much I appreciated his presence. So rest in peace, Mike. Tabby, or all the guys and gals at Fantasy Pros, whatever, cliched, but DM's open, always here to help. I listened to the Fantasy Pros podcast on Monday with Pat Fitzmaurice and Dan Harris, along with Joe, and I gotta hand it to those guys. They did a bang up job getting through a podcast that I would have never been able to get through, I'm assuming, if I were in their shoes. So big ups to those guys as well. Anyway, okay, I'm officially going to stop talking, since I said I was going to stop talking, then kept talking. So in a couple weeks, when Pulp Fantasy comes out again, you'll be directed back to your regularly scheduled program of goofy stuff and shenanigans. So I hope you heard something during this episode that you can take with you. If not, you know a little bit more about me and something I've gone through. So just remember, as my friend Doug, the Fantasy Moose, always says, you never know what somebody else is going through. You just never know what somebody else is going through. So practice empathy, and whatever you do, don't take anything that you have for granted. Appreciate what you have while you have it. Another cliche, but it's something that I have to intentionally focus on each and every day. So with that, next time, see you later. Bye.